You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. On this episode, I am joined by Chris Burge, the co-founder and CEO of Spark Crowdfunding. Chris, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It's nice to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
Delighted to have you. Typical fashion, what we do with this podcast is we go right back to the beginning, chapter 1, and work our way from there. So, from my research, it looks like you grew up in the Midlands of the UK. Am I correct?
Well, kind of not necessarily the Midlands. I grew up in a place called Chester, which is right on the Welsh border and just below Liverpool. So it's about 30 miles from Liverpool. And I grew up in a rural village called Farndon, which is literally right on the Welsh border. So I could stand on one side of the river and throw a stone into Wales quite easily. So that's where I grew up and spent most of my childhood and up to my teens.
Talk to me about your childhood growing up there. What was it like? Got any fond favorite memories?
I loved, my childhood. Yeah, we had as I say, it was quite a rural life. It was a small village, just about 10 miles away from Chester, which in itself isn't a big city anyway. And of course, it's dwarfed by Liverpool and Manchester, which are just, as I say, are just a bit further up the road. No, very rural life. We had to travel by bus to the school, the secondary school, which was kind of in another village, kind of somewhere away, 10, 15 miles away. No, had a very enjoyable time. Probably one of my favorite memories is the river that I just spoke about there, and kind of walking there with my dog as I grew up as a young teenager, really. And had a great life. Thanks.
So, early days growing up down there, who do you think had the biggest impact on you or inspired you the most?
Wow. Well, obviously my mother and father had a big impact on me, and kind of them standing over me and kind of making me do my homeworks at various points and everything. But I do remember a teacher of mine, a science teacher, actually a chemistry teacher in secondary school, called Mr. Ravenscroft. Howard is his first name, actually. And he was an amazing teacher, very unusual, uncommon kind of mechanism for teaching. And some found it quite abrasive, but for me it was very, very opening, and he treated us more as young adults as opposed to children, and that he was a big influence, and and he kind of guided me down the science route as well. Not that I think I was kind of against that anyway, but I was an easy student to kind of cajole down that route, and I went on to do biology and physics as an A-level as well. I didn't do the chemistry actually, but biology and physics as an A-level, which obviously was the start to my engineering career as well afterwards. He was a very big influence, but he passed away just a couple of years ago, I heard actually. So anyway, he's no longer with us, but big influence.
Amazing to see the influence some of the teachers can have on us. I know my French teacher turned around my love for French, or my hate into love. You talked about engineering, getting into engineering. I know that you studied engineering in Coventry, and then later on energy management in DIT, which is now TUD. But you ended up being your own boss. Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
Well, entrepreneurs is probably a little bit of a stretch. No, not really. My mother worked in the bank, and my father worked in commerce for most of his life, but was made redundant in I'd say probably his early 50s, something like that. And started his own business up, and but it was it wasn't a kind of manufacturing business. It wasn't. It was a very small kind of one-man band. Or actually, I think he actually employed another person in the end, but it was very small. So no, I wouldn't say that was a big kind of entrepreneurial kickstart to life. And in fact, I kind of never really thought that I would be an entrepreneur, because my life as an early engineer was very much a constructed mechanism of kind of going from up the ladder and getting into the management of an engineering company and thereafter. So no, I never really thought about it, but no, certainly not from my parents anyway, and not many other people around my friends' fathers or mothers were entrepreneurs, really. There were a couple, of course, and you could see them kind of who'd done well, and who drove the nice cars or lived in the nice houses. But no, it was something that I kind of gathered as time went on, really.
Through my research, I can see that you've been to places like, well, obviously raised in the UK, France, South Africa, United States of America. What's one thing you're into or curious about that not a lot of people would know about you?
I'm a big Francophile. I know you just mentioned talking about your hate from French and into love. So I worked there for just before I moved to France. Actually, in fact, I was my girlfriend at the time, now wife. We commuted between the two countries for a good period of time. So I'm a big Francophile. Love the French way of life. Love the way that they just kind of exist, and kind of the food culture, the kind of locality culture as well, where you get your everything from the local shops. I just love that kind of way of life. But I mean, there are aspects of French life as well which are very unappealing as well, particularly their entrepreneurship and lack of, and the fact that there's a big state influence within France, of course. On the total flip side to that is the States, of course, where everything is much, well, totally free. The entrepreneurial element there is very, very encouraging and nice to see. But there are other aspects of the American life that perhaps aren't quite so appealing as well.
Yeah, it's a yin and yang. Actually, to talk about my love-hate relationship with French, that teacher inspired me so much that I ended up doing Erasmus and living in France for 6 months. So again, going back to the impact of teachers that can have on you. Anyway, I digress. Started working as an engineer, then moved into energy management. What had you leave a corporate job to start your own business?
Well, when I was working in France, I was working big corporate, manufacturing business, and my wife, she didn't speak French, so for her moving to France wasn't going to be an easy transition. The UK was then the next option, of course, and for us both finding a job in the same city wasn't going to be so easy. So I moved over here, and when I moved over here, I moved into a consultancy first of all, and did some consulting, which was my move from corporate, big manufacturing, big organisation into something much smaller, very small. In fact, there were only kind of a handful of us in the consultancy. So that was the move across, and that was I suppose the start of my move away from big commerce.
You've mentioned in previous podcasts that you moved to Ireland/Dublin 20 years ago. What was it that had you move here?
My wife now.
Okay.
So it's actually 21. I was actually recalibrating it, actually. Yes, I moved over in Easter 2000, so it's just 21 years now. So a lot of my business life really has been here in Dublin now, and my connections have grown significantly, obviously within the Dublin life, or Irish life as well, to that extent. So that was my reason for moving over. We, as I say, we couldn't really move to France. We didn't move to the UK because of the logistics of get us both finding a job in the same city at the same time. So by default, we moved here. And at the beginning, I thought, oh, listen, I'll be over here for a few years and somewhere else afterwards. But 21 years later, I still find myself here. And now I've got two daughters who are in kind of schools, and the chances of moving anywhere else are very slim now. But not that I want to. I really enjoy kind of living in Ireland.
The reason why I ask is because you moved to Ireland while, 20 odd years ago, my parents moved to the UK because they couldn't find jobs. So it was strange because there was one going one way and the other going the other way. You're now self-employed business owner, co-founder. What's your favorite aspect of running a business?
I like the diversity of what I have to do on a daily basis. It's and the kind of having to strategically think about positioning the business in order to grow. That's a big change to corporate life, obviously, where in corporate life you're just kind of doing your job. You're fairly blinkered, although obviously some people are a little bit less so. But you have to think very laterally when you're running a business like Spark, and that aspect of it is really quite appealing to me, and I've really embraced it, and I really love it, and love what I do now. I didn't really enjoy engineering as much. Looking back in it now, at the time I did, and I enjoyed doing, and I think I was fairly reasonable at it. But looking back and comparing what I was then and what I am now, totally chalk and cheese. And I've heard so many entrepreneurs say this as well, but I wish I'd started earlier. And of course, I wish I'd started earlier as well.
You say chalk and cheese, and you're correct in saying that, from engineering to what you're in now, crowdfunding. I first came across you from Zip Mobility, Charlie Gleason, his company. They've done a round of raising money with your business. Talk to me, or talk to the people more so. What is crowdfunding and how does it work?
So crowdfunding is a two-sided marketplace where we have kind of companies on one side who are seeking funds and investors on the other who have got money and are wanting to invest into early stage businesses. And we are just a facilitator. We just matchmake between the two. So we showcase the companies who are looking for the money, and we ask the investors on the other side to look at it and consider whether they want to invest. It's totally their decision as to whether they go for company A or B or C or all three of them. Who knows? And they decide how much they're going to put in as well. So those small amounts of money from a large pool of people suddenly start to kind of raise that money amount. And with Charlie, he was seeking 400,000. We've got over 500,000 for him now, and he's delighted, obviously. So he's got another round of funding. Well, it's not completed yet, but it will be very soon, in a very, very short period of time. Whereas if you were seeking that same amount of money from a VC or an angel network, it would take you 3 or 4 or 5 times as long to do the same thing.
And was that what got you into it, to give kind of the company owners the ability to tap into a broader network of people so they could get funding from them rather than going to venture capitalists?
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw the rise of crowdfunding, not only in the UK but kind of in the US, and together with my co-founder, we went, okay, well, listen, why doesn't that exist here? Why don't we look at it? So we did, and we started to kind of do the research behind it and kind of work out how it worked and what we could do, and we've adapted the model. So we're not exactly the same as the UK or the US ones, and we have a slightly different approach, but nevertheless ultimately the same thing, by raising money for companies from the crowd, from people. So it helps democratize that investment, because if you wanted to invest, and let's take Charlie, and he's an Enterprise Ireland HPSU company that the state has invested in through Enterprise Ireland. If you are somebody who's got a spare few hundred quid or even a few thousand quid, you couldn't invest in an Enterprise Ireland backed business before. It was just not possible. It's not feasible. It'd have cost you as much in legal fees and and third party professional fees to put that money in that it would be to actually invest anyway. So this kind of opens it up to more a broader base of people to help young companies, but also to help themselves as well, to get a return on that investment. And that's ultimately what these investors are doing. They're not doing it because they like Charlie. They're doing it because they like Charlie and they think it's going to give them a return on their investment. So their investment of 1,000 hopefully will become 3 or 5 or 10,000 as well in a couple of years' time. And that's ultimately what they're trying to do.
Safe to say for any listeners that your company, you guys do your due diligence, because you accept, I think it was 1 in every 10 or 1 in every 12 that come to you and say, hey, we want to do crowdfunding from your platform. And there's investors that have invested upwards of, multiple 6 figures as well. So it's not just small investors that are on your platform. But for anyone listening, and I'll put the links to your site below in whatever you're listening or watching this on YouTube, to check out any of the companies that are currently looking for investment. But for anyone listening, what can they expect? I know you typically say like 5 to 7 years for return on your money, but rather than me just make an assumption, do you want to tell the people of, if I invest today, I can expect to see a return, or just ignore that for 5 to 10 years, then look at it?
Most startup companies are not looking at the 10-year kind of bracket. They're looking for a return. They're looking for an exit within, and then when I say an exit, that's either a trade sale or a flotation on a stock market, although that's very uncommon, or a management buyout in a 3 to 7 year time window. Really, that's the ideal. There'll be companies, and that don't have an exit in 7 years, and it might be 8 or 9. Who knows? But that's certainly not the hope or aspiration of these companies. These companies are high scale, high growth companies that will reach a point that they'll be snapped up in theory, in expectation, by a larger company a little bit further down the line, and that's what the investor is buying into as well. Now, nobody has a crystal ball and can say, yes, okay, after 3 years and 6 months we're going to be selling to XYZ company. Nobody knows that. So it is really an aspiration as opposed to a guarantee. But when you put your money in, yes, you pretty much have to, it's totally illiquid. So you pretty much have to leave it there and not forget about it, but certainly don't expect anything very soon. And in fact, perhaps even don't expect anything. And when it does come, it's a nice surprise for you, because you also have to expect that 5 out of 10 companies, and maybe even 6 out of 10 companies, will fail. So you're hoping that company 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 will do 2x, 5x, 10x, and 20x in order to pay for the ones that have failed. So that's how it works.
I think what you're doing is brilliant, but I'm sure you've come up against challenges. Let's focus on the last kind of 12 to 18 months. Any challenges, objections, stalls that arose that you didn't expect, and how did you tackle it?
Ones that we didn't expect. Well, regulation is the big one that's coming in, and that's coming in later on this year. So we were expecting that one to come in. So that's going to be not a challenge as such, but something that we've going to have to work hard to get sorted. There will be other entrants into the market. We're the first and only here in Ireland, absolutely. But we are absolutely expecting others to start up as well. So they will be a challenge, and when that happens, then obviously that pool is then kind of divided into 2 or 3 or 4, and we're going to have to be better than the others in order to survive and in order to actually grow as well. And that's what we expect to be doing as well. Other challenges that have happened, I mean, there's always the kind of little hiccups that happen on a day-to-day basis, but nothing that's been insurmountable, and nothing that's really kind of gone, oh my goodness, we're going to be sunk here below the waterline if we don't plug this very quickly. There's been no kind of emergencies like that, thankfully. So really, it's just the day-to-day grind to actually get more investors in, get new clients coming up to us, and the marketing behind the Spark to make sure people understand who we are and what we do as well, because you always think, because you're in this own little bubble, you're kind of doing your LinkedIn posts and you're doing your Twitter feeds and everything else, and you kind of when you don't look. When you don't stand back and look at it yourself, you're in this bubble, you think, oh, everybody must know about Spark. Everybody absolutely knows about Spark. Why wouldn't they know about Spark? But of course, when you do speak to somebody, no, never come across you, and they're in your industry, and you go, how did you not know about us? So we are marketing, absolutely, but we can do a better job, that's for sure. And we need to spread the word, and that's what we try and do.
Are there any sales or business leaders out there that you look up to yourself?
I just read the No Rules by Netflix, the founder of Netflix, which I thought was amazing, actually. And I didn't know that anything about the Netflix business actually until I read the book. But it's a very good read, and what he's done is amazing. He basically, what the No Rules, I don't know whether you've read it or come across it, but it's,
no, I'll have to add it to my list.
It's basically the getting rid of, by the definition of the book, the no rules. So he basically takes away all the rules. So there's no expenses claims. You just do whatever is best for the company. Yeah, he's taken away kind of all of the HR headaches that are there. He's talked about increasing talent density. So okay, Spark is quite a minnow, or very much a minnow compared to Netflix, but nevertheless, I since reading that, I've really looked up to that and wow, and gone, wow, that's something I'd like to implement many of those procedures into the business as it grows. Now, as I say, I'm very much a minnow and not really kind of got 3,000 people to look after at the moment, but nevertheless, one day maybe.
One day. A commonly held belief in your industry that you, let's put it this way, you passionately disagree with?
Well, I was at a talk before COVID. This is pre-COVID. I was at a business meeting, and one of the panelists said that crowdfunding was illegal, and it took me aback actually, but I had to kind of go, but no, it's not. Absolutely, it's not. And we've had a legal expert opinion saying so. But there's kind of there's a kind of maybe amongst some people kind of going, oh, they look down their noses, particularly the people who are in these venture capitalists, who are in these private equity houses, who see crowdfunding as probably a disruptor, and probably someone that's going to be eating their lunch at some stage. And they tend to look down their noses at us a little, but really we are exactly the same as them. We just have a wider pool of investors with perhaps not quite so deep pockets. Having said that, you mentioned yourself at the beginning, we've had investors coming in with six-figure investments as well, and we're delighted that we do have those on our books, and yeah, that really helps obviously some of the campaigns significantly. But we'll regularly get multiple tens of thousands being invested at a time. So yes, we are a disruptor, and those are the people who are the people that we're disrupting. The VCs and the private equity houses are perhaps sitting up a little bit more keenly now and listening to what Spark is doing.
Interesting. What continues to drive you, Christopher?
The passion of kind of doing this job, earning money and growing a business into something that's bigger and better than it is now. So that's really the main driving factor of what I'm doing. And as I say, I've embraced it wholeheartedly, and I skip to from my bedroom to my office. Anyway, at the moment I was going to say skip to work, but no, it's a very enjoyable way of spending 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 hours a day. Actually, it's very pleasant.
I know that you talked about, and the answer to this may be differently now, but in a previous podcast I listened to, you talked about the typical kind of exit for one of the people that come onto your platform was 3 to 7 years, and that you hadn't seen an exit at that particular point yet. I don't know if that has changed, but the question I want to ask is, I want you to imagine it's the year 2030 and you're looking back on the last kind of 9 to 10 years. What would you like to be looking back on from the perspective of the co-founder CEO of Spark?
Well, I mentioned that kind of 5 or 6 out of 10 businesses fail, and they do, and that's just a fact that we have to kind of to look at. But we curate, we're highly selective, as you said. We take about 1 in 10 companies that apply to us, and so because of that curation that we have, and because of that kind of sifting that we have, I'd like to think that we are not losing, that 5 out of the 10 companies that we've helped to fund have not gone bust, and hopefully that figure is somewhat reduced. And I don't know whether it'll be 1 in 10 or 3 in 10 or 4.5 in 10, I don't know. But nevertheless, in 10 years' time, I'd like to be looking back and going, okay, well, listen, we helped all of these companies grow, and we were the first people on the ladder, first investors that kind of invested into them. And I say Spark actually doesn't invest, but we facilitated, if you like, the investment at the first rung of the ladder, and that they've gone on to be, I don't know, massive companies. Who knows, that they could be the next Stripe, and world domination. So I'd like to be looking back at a number of the alumni, of the Spark alumni, and going, okay, yeah, we helped them, and they've gone on to bigger and better things, and have made our investors a healthy return on investment, and made the promoters a strong, successful business.
I hope that does happen for you. One question that I started to ask people on my podcast is, have you got any tricks, might be the wrong word, but let's use it for this question. Have you got any tricks that you've discovered to help keep you focused or productive throughout a busy day?
Um, I really am quite diligent about filing my emails to almost an excessive point. So yes, I will. I don't have an inbox that is thousands long. I will file and make sure that they are parked away so that I can hopefully quickly retrieve an email that somebody is referring to or something that happened. So that's my to-do list, if you like. My empty. So I'll keep my inbox with that email in there until that task is passed, and then move it into the file. So that's I find that a very useful way of a trick, if you like, as you called it, to make myself productive. Are there others? Well, yeah, cutting calls when we've finished the job. I mean, particularly with Zoom now. Many people kind of slot a full hour into a meeting when it doesn't need to be an hour, and so we'll cut that short whenever we need to. But I'm sure many people do that as well. So that wouldn't be considered a trick, I'd imagine. But no, I mean, COVID itself has made life very much more efficient as well. And luckily, I've been fortunate to have a business that hasn't needed to be in an office or kind of face to face very often. Although at the beginning we did think that was going to be a bit of a nightmare, where we weren't going to do face to face meetings, because up to that point we were meeting everybody in a hotel lobby or wherever it happened to be for a quick coffee to talk about the actual this is the onboarding of the companies, to talk about the company and how it all, but of course that's all done remotely now, and it works very efficiently. So instead of actually having to dash across town or to another meeting, it's all done from sitting in this chair. So of course that's very efficient.
If your house was burning down, and I want you to imagine all your loved ones, animals, partners, kids are all safe, but you can only save one item from your house, what one item would that be?
I'm probably staring at it. It's probably my laptop, which is quite sad. I also have, not that I don't know whether you come across this thing called preppers, but I have a bag that has got a few things that are dear to me as well, that is tucked away just in the eaves of my attic. And that is one as well. And in there is a number of things that are dear to me, of all shapes and sizes, some worthless, some worth something. So that would be my grab bag, that if the house was burning, that on my laptop I'd be running out the house with.
Nice. Well, look, I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little more over the last 30 minutes, and I wish you all success going forward.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It's nice to chat to you.